disguise. It is the outward appearance of who you are, maybe not actually who you are. And so what we're doing is we're coming up with not only a lie or a veil of lies, but we're developing a character. And I think that that is very important. And also with pretext, you know, you may be yourself within the pretext that you're using. If you're, say, trying to help a family member quit smoking, you know, you can come up with various types of pretexts that may not involve much, if any, lying. So it's important to understand that this is the purpose or alleged motive or the cloak that you wrap around yourself to achieve the goal. The way that I break it down is that a pretext is something that you are, something that you do, using something that you have to gain something that you need. More specifically, we're coming up with a character who plays a role, who has information to substantiate that role, that all leads to the goal of capturing the flag. It's the most simple way to describe that. What that looks like a lot of the time in information security and penetration testing is that you are, say, an IT support professional who does support for a living and has information about their computer, and you're trying to find out, say, the VPN information. And there's various, you know, variations of this that have popped up in things like the SECTF and other social engineering capture the flag type situations. But I think that it's also really relevant for professional red teamers and people that are doing assessments, that these kind of things remain constant through every iteration of a pretext. So how do good lies fall apart? There's three main areas where I feel that good lies can quickly fall apart. And those three areas are, you know, your confidence, the knowledge that you have to substantiate what you're saying to the target, and then the simplicity of that pretext. And we're going to break each one of those things down. So first of all, we're looking at confidence. And this is something that I think I'm not alone with struggling with. And especially in the early days, when I first started working on learning social engineering and building up my skills, I felt like I had to use a very complex pretext and be extremely technical and know all the technical things and be confident in that delivery. And I was not at all prepared to carry that off. So having the preparedness, naturally having a personality that has confidence, not cockiness, but confidence, is something that can help lend well to doing these types of things. But if you don't, it's absolutely something you can learn. I am naturally a very anxious and self-conscious person. So for me, you know, the last 4 to 5 years have really been about building up my own self-confidence to increase my success when it comes to being able to deliver pretexts and speaking to you like I am today, for example. Having the confidence goes kind of hand in hand, I believe, with the OSINT, or having the knowledge, whether that's knowledge that you gain through experience at work or information that you found while you were doing recon on the target. All that information helps you feel more confident so that you can overcome any objections from the target, so that you can speak confidently about the systems or the applications that you're asking them to use. You know, if you want to know what version of software they're using and you can't guide them over the phone, excuse me, for example, then you're going to look kind of silly, and they may start to have a shadow of doubt about whether or not you are who you say you are, or whether or not they should be doing what you're asking them to do. So confidence is key. And next we're going to move on to simplicity. I've watched a lot of people do, especially vishing, and they feel like they have to come up with very complex pretexts that involve accents and super technical scripts and very intricate scripts that were targeted to one specific person and their likes, dislikes, family status, marital status, all those things. And when you try to make things so complicated, you're only increasing the number of ways that things could go terribly wrong. So one of the things that I did, and I'm going to speak a lot about SECTF because it's easy for me to share those things because they're out there in the wild already. But the first year I competed, I made my pretext so specific to the people that I targeted that after I, dialed 12 numbers and not got anyone to pick up the phone, the person that I'd finally got to talk to me, I didn't have a pretext for, and I just kind of had to make something up on the spot. And it wasn't the most effective way to do it. So the following year, I made up a pretext that was very general and could work for any employee, but I wanted to target a certain type of employee because I felt like they would be more vulnerable. That doesn't mean that if I'd called, the 25th number on my list of priority to call, that it wouldn't have applied to that person. So short, sweet, simple. Don't give too many details. Don't come up with too complicated of a backstory. Instead of, say, for example, hi, I'm Bethany from X company, and these are all the things I do, and this is who I am, and this is how you know me, and this is why it's relevant for me to talk to you, and this is why you need to tell me because I have this authority, and blah, blah, blah. What is infinitely more effective is, hey, I'm Bethany from the headquarters of your company. Do you have a couple minutes to help me with something? And right there, you're kind of bypassing a lot of the avenues where the target's mind could go to find ways to challenge you. Thirdly, knowledge. This is critical. If you don't know what your target company's culture is like, or how they do certain processes, what systems they use, the jargon they use, and you use a word that's wrong, in that's not how they refer to clients. They call them partners, or they call their employees associates, or they call their system one word and you mispronounce the name of the software that they're using, and you make yourself sound like an outsider. That's all going to be stuff that pokes holes in your pretext and can lead the target again to challenge you and start to question whether or not you are who you say you are, or that you have the authority to ask them for what you're asking for. So the goal of the pretext. The goal of your pretext is to bypass the target's logic processing when they would question or challenge who you are, by not tipping off their subconscious that you're a threat. And to put it very plainly and basically, high-level overhead, your subconscious is continually scanning for threats. And it only notifies your conscious brain to do something about a threat when it identifies an actual perceived threat. And a good example of this is when you're driving, you're continuously scanning your rearview mirror, even though you may not even be conscious of it. But it's only when a car is too close to your backside that you realize that you've seen it, if that makes sense. So you are continuously scanning, but your subconscious doesn't say, hey, Mayday, we have a problem, until a car is too close or something looks out of the ordinary or unexpected. So the purpose of our pretext is to go under the radar of that rear view mirror check and not tip off the target's brain that there's something up. And so we're giving a nice facade to make it seem like, we are not a threat, and this pretext obscures their ability to identify that threat and bypasses the logic processing center. A good pretext, in my opinion, goes straight for the emotional centers and sort of shuts down the logic. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. I know there's tons of negative pretexts out there that are really geared towards going straight for the emotional response, just a frantic panic response. And I don't necessarily want to encourage that. I think you can target the emotional parts of a person without leaving them, in a state of panic or being fearful or distraught. So we're going to talk about specifically today OSINT for pretexts in the context of businesses and their employees. This is my typical process for gathering intelligence on a business target. So the first thing that I do when I get a target is I go to their website. That sounds really, really silly, but you'd be surprised, A, how much information companies disclose on their website that could give you a good starting point, and B, how many times it is just so easy to go, I know where to go to find all this juicy information. I'm just going to bypass the website and go straight to that. So I'm going straight to all these other sources instead of going to the source. Get a good idea of their company, moral, ethical, and cultural stance. Take a look at any people you can identify from the website, any phone numbers, email addresses that may go to direct departments. It could be a good jumping off point for finding other information out there on the web. Company websites are a veritable goldmine of information, whether they understand it or not. And if you want to get a little trickier, you can go search their domain for things like PDF documents and Excel spreadsheets and stuff that may be laying out there publicly, but not necessarily public facing on their website, but still publicly available using things like Google Docs. So here's kind of my progression through the information gathering process. When we're talking about businesses specifically, I go to target website, as we talked about briefly, and then I will go into Glassdoor, Indeed, LinkedIn, and we'll get to some other sites that I feel are relevant to this phase of the investigation. And then we go from there into identifying the employees, looking at LinkedIn. Instagram is just my favorite. Facebook is great, but it can be hit or miss. Once you've identified an employee, you can go find their Facebook page and see if there's anything there. Right up front, I'm going to advocate that you do not actively engage with any of the employee accounts. Don't friend people. Don't try to infiltrate or directly speak to employees or their groups or any of that stuff. This is all very much a passive information gathering effort. Once you've kind of looked at all of those things, then you can go into more of the specifics, start using Google Docs to search, keywords that you discovered during the first phase of the investigation. That's when you can get into some more complex OSINT tools, some web apps and things that can help you find certain bits of information that might help or aid you in your efforts. And then I kind of just let it go from there into the next rabbit hole. So I just follow rabbit holes until I feel like they kind of dead end me, and then I go back and start again and just collect all the information in tabs or in a notebook application or something like that. I like to do screenshots, and so I'll grab screenshots of things because I feel like that really helps my clients understand that this stuff is real and I didn't just write a line in a report that I found it, like here it is. So this is a company that I let you guys pick. So I let you guys pick and you chose drug and pharmaceutical companies and financial companies. So that's what we're dealing with today. So Johnson & Johnson, this is their website. We looked at their website first. I looked at their careers page. I found a job, and I just wanted to point out this is actually fantastic that they said knowledge of web-based UI development technologies such as X, Y, and Z. They're not actually disclosing what they use, which is great. That's a good thing for the company. But a lot of times I find that companies will disclose the exact technology that they use, and that is not great because it gives people like you and I an edge as far as what kind of technologies they use. And the platforms that they're on. So then again, we looked at the company review websites, and I briefly mentioned these, but there are a ton of them. Glassdoor is my go-to, love it. It's fantastic. There's a lot of activity there, so you're more likely to find great photos and great reviews. Read all the reviews. I know it takes a lot of time, but read all of the reviews. And then read their job postings and read everything that you can find, because it's going to give you a great idea of what the company culture is. It's going to give you a wonderful foundation for you know, identifying where or how, you know, people are, how they act, and give you a really good feel for the type of vibe you need to give, especially if you're going to be doing a vishing assessment. So in addition to Glassdoor, Indeed is great, but don't count out other sites. For example, we have Great Place to Work, Comparability. This is Career Bliss, and you know, the Job Crowd. These sites are less monitored, so don't count them out, because brands may not be engaged with monitoring their reputation or doing things to correct negative reviews or responding to things. Here, you may find the most salacious information on the sites that are less frequently monitored by the brands themselves. So check everywhere is basically what I'm saying. Don't take the photos that you find on these websites at face value. You know, do your due diligence, look in the backgrounds, identify, you know, get good at identifying things that could be helpful and critical to your investigation. Like, oh, it's just a desk. No, it's their phone, their computer, their, you know, tons of things. In the one picture here, we actually have the employee's badge, their letterhead, an example of a proposal, business cards, their computer, their software applications, including the mail client and various other applications, all in one picture. And that is all information that could be really valuable in setting up a pretext that's both believable and you know, relevant to the conversation that you want to have with the person. More photos of from Glassdoor and LinkedIn. These are for various companies. You can find out what charitable organizations they are affiliated with, what the interior of their building looks like, what the exterior of their building looks like, their HVAC system, the fact that Friday is a work from home day and it may be super dead in the office, and if you've got to do a physical, then that may be a great day to do it, or a terrible one if you want to blend in with the crowd. Also look at the media that the company puts out themselves. This picture at the top right was posted by the company, and it clearly shows a lot of their technology and the interior of their building and some other things that I probably wouldn't have posted online if I were that brand. The two pictures below are from a previous target with the SECTF. These are screen caps from a video that they posted about their technology and how they're at the forefront of the industry, and they're innovative, and they're, you know, trying to attract talent. And so these, you know, culture and technology and, you know, the braggy brand videos are great to find information in as well. So as nauseating as they may be, you must watch them all and pay careful attention. Moving on, do not discount mapping websites. I found a significant number of flags, for example, in the SECTF with companies that had, for example, I was looking for a dumpster, and I looked all the way around the building, and I managed to find the back of the building. The loading bay was open when they took the photos, and the dumpsters were sitting right there inside with the waste management company name and their phone number and website and everything just all over them. And so that right there was, you know, money. So look at the overhead views, look at the street views. Don't just look at Google Maps, look at Bing Maps, look at Google Earth. Those are all different captures, and they're all going to give you great information. So be careful to examine those. You can also use things like, oh, I'm across the street at this bakery. Well, make sure the bakery's open. Okay, so you find the information on Google Maps, but like call the restaurant and just make sure that somebody picks up before you decide to incorporate something like that into your pretext. As far as the corporate social media, we're going to move over to LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and those kinds of things. I start with LinkedIn so I can try to find some employees. Maybe you find them on Instagram or Facebook, maybe you don't. So don't just limit yourself to looking for employees that identify themselves on LinkedIn. And also keep in mind, there are many, many SOCs on LinkedIn who claim to work at places that they don't work. For example, my own company, I have like 10 employees that I've never met, and I find it hilarious that they decide to connect to me after they say they work for my company. Once you've identified the employees, you can get into their social media and learn a lot about the business. I personally love geolocated Instagram pictures. The branding and the marketing across social, which we talked about, but using these employees, you can pivot into their other posts. So they post one thing, it's geotagged to work, it's got their coffee cup in front of their monitor, whatever. So now go look at their whole feed and see if there are any other pictures that are relevant to work that maybe weren't geotagged to work. You can also find coworkers, and these oversharing employees can kind of do their coworkers a disservice by identifying them, and then you can go look at their feed. So maybe their coworker isn't geolocating their posts on Instagram, but they're still posting work content, and they're being very careful to say at work and not at specific company. And they're very careful to hide certain things because they assume that you won't know where they're working. But once you can connect them to the company, now all of this information is relevant to that company because you've connected that dot between actual company employee and maybe company employee. And you can substantiate that they are, and then learn about the company further from that other employee that maybe didn't identify where they work. Coworkers, vendors, and then just other rabbit holes and areas of interest to follow are great. People love posting their accomplishments, and so you can get full names off of their certificates. You can get information about them from their badges and what the badges look like. We can also identify side hustles and side hustle pages that maybe the employees have made, their hobby groups, pages that they follow. Keep in mind that every comment on their profile pictures and their cover pictures is public, so you can learn a lot of personal sensitive information just because family members don't always keep that in mind when they comment on their new profile picture or cover image. Check for public pictures, check their likes, reviews, check-ins. A lot of that stuff is public, and you can learn about their hobbies and routines, their daily life. If they have kids, and if they take their computers home, if they have dogs, if they like coffee. And you can offer incentives like, hey, click this for a Starbucks card, and learn about what kind of software they have, and all these other things that can be great to inform pretext for phishing via email as well as phone. We talked a little bit about side hustles and things like that, but the best employee, in my opinion, to learn from is the employee who is no longer an employee. So former employees are great. They leave very honest reviews, and they love to dish about the worst parts of the company, which can be helpful to you because you can get a good view of where the frustrations or the pain points might be, and then use that to inform a pretext that could help. Like you find out that they hate their computers, they're super slow, and you call and you say, hey, IT's decided that we're upgrading all these computers, and we just need to know what software you need on this computer before we configure it and ship it out, and then you'll just ship your old one back to the main office and you'll be good to go. And even though I'm not saying, hey, you want a computer, I am incentivizing them with a new computer at work, which is something that most people get excited about. Now you can look at other avenues to inform your pretext or determine who you're going to be. Check to see if they have a cafeteria. Could you be somebody from the cafeteria vendor? Check if they have party vendors. Are you, a vendor from a recent party following up for a review? Do you know what their garbage service is? Maybe you need to call and update their payment information. Janitorial services. Maybe you need to reschedule or get a badge made or various other things. IT consultants, sometimes they're hired as a consultant as opposed to having IT people in-house, or they're hiring a larger consultancy to come in and do a big project. And you can use that information to give your pretext the authority to ask for certain information. These are all great things to discover and then figure out if you can use to your advantage. You want to do a good sweep of all the geolocated photos to your company building. And the way that you can do that in Instagram, you can do it from mobile or online. It's a little easier on mobile, but if you go into search and you put in the company name, and then swipe over to locations or places and hit that, it'll show you all the addresses for that company that come up easily. And you can also enter it just by the address too. But once you've verified that this photo was taken at the location, then you know that this is, valid to your cause, and that it's going to be relevant to what you're doing, and you're not going to look like an idiot because you actually know that this is from the building that you're going to be calling or emailing employees at. We can learn about what days the company is closed. So for example, this company has specific days that they observe that the business is closed. So you wouldn't want to plan your physical for, that day, say Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, because their building is closed and you're going to look like an idiot when you show up and nobody's there. You also can identify things like valued customers. For example, the top right picture, this board inside of this company is a customer that they wanted to feature of theirs. And so now we have a customer that we can pretext as to then target this employer or this organization. Speaking of employers, this HR person decided that they would post sensitive company HR software screenshots with a new employee's name to Instagram and locate, oh, man, I need to stop using that word, geolocate the picture to the company. So that right there, I think, should be a write-up. I mean, at the minimum, but hey, it's just me. You can find some really incredible information out there in the wild. Some of it's going to shock you. So now that we've done all of our OSINT, we're going to take the facts that are going to give our pretext credibility, and we're going to collect them all up together and figure out what we needed to use them for, and use those facts to create the pretext rather than trying to make facts to substantiate a pretext we came up with in our head before we started the investigation. What I like to do is gather all the information into 4 different categories. Who am I? What companies or vendors or internal job roles, functions, employees that I identify that I could potentially pretext as? Who are they? Where are the soft targets? Who do I think is going to help me? Is it going to be a customer service person, or do they not have the level of access that I need? Or do I need to target somebody who has a more skilled role and then try to find somebody that would be inclined to help me through having a job, say in HR, where they're helpful, but they also have a level of access that will give me what I need. Put together your goals, your flag list, so to speak, what you want to accomplish using this pretext, and then any details about the pretext that you want to keep in mind. Am I going for a certain flavor of pretext, or what's important to me to keep when I'm coming up with this pretext. So important to note here, if you do decide that you're going to be a third party and be an external person, you must conduct the same level of OSINT on your pretexting as company. So not just your target, but the vendor that you're impersonating. You will also need to do your due diligence there and examine all of the same things about that company. All right, so basic level. Now we need to decide, are we going with an internal or an external pretext? Are we going to, be authority-based, or are we going to go at it from an angle of empathy? I tend to go for empathy because it's much easier for me to keep my emotional state and my anxiety, supporting that empathetic pretext rather than tearing down a pretext that may be based in authority. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a frantic mess and I'm nervous and I'm anxious and I'm asking for help, to the subconscious of the target, that seems normal. Those two things line up. But if I am a anxious, nervous mess and I'm trying to, with authority, ask them to do something for me, those two things contradict each other. My emotional state and what I'm asking for and the fact that I should be confident and have authority are conflicting. And so that's not a situation that we want to be in. So if you're not confident, I would say lean towards empathy for a while. Align your biases and the way that you feel and act. Your character needs to mirror that of the target. So you want to kind of form this mini tribe, or what I call a 5-minute friend, with this person, and you need to have your goals, thoughts, feelings, your personality, and the way that you behave kind of mirror that person so that you vibe with them. You want to emulate their culture of the company. You want to keep their values and their ethical and moral stuff in mind, as well as your own. And then make sure you make a list, if you have to, of keywords and jargon, and come up with your pretext theme. So I use a Foursquare to do this, and I put all the things that I need in the bottom right corner. Well, what are my goals? What's the information I need? And then I go to the soft targets that I've identified, and I determine that I want to have somebody who I can connect with. And so I choose that person, and then I list their name, number, the company, their title, their email address, all the information I found about them. That's not listed here, but are they a parent? What animals do they have? What are their passions? What do they post a lot about on Instagram? Where are, the things that I can really connect with them on? And I try to choose things that I'm also passionate about so that I can genuinely engage them about those things. Then I determine who I am. So if I'm a vendor from another company, I need to, either make up or pretend to be somebody who actually works there. Typically, I make it up. Typically, I choose a huge company and I just make up a name. And if they challenge it, I say I'm new. And I put my character's name, the number I'm spoofing, the company, my title within the company, and email address, and any other relevant information that I need in order to accomplish the goal. And then finally, I put in, my motivation, anything that we have in common, what are my biases, what culture am I trying to mirror, anything that's going to be relevant to building the veil of this character and keeping my target in this scene with me, because we're kind of talking about this like an actor in a scene. You need to be able to become this person within your pretext and just drop everything that makes you you, and just live in that person for the time that you're engaging with this person, especially if you're over the phone, because they are going to be able to hear it in your voice if you are doubting yourself or fumbling with papers or whatever. They're gonna feel it. Even if they can't see it or possibly hear it, they're gonna feel it. So it's very important for you to be able to keep this veil up and have those things in front of you to remind you of who you are and what your motivations are and what you're doing. So once you have this all together, you're going to start trying to come up with ways that you can build rapport, link ideas, memorize the bits of information that you need to know so that you can work those into the flow of a natural conversation. You can't just call up and have a battery of questions that you need to ask them and expect them to just be like, yeah, sure, okay, here's all the answers. In certain situations, you're going to need to just have a casual conversation and lead people to give you the information that you want, whether that's through, having them correct you, for example. So, hey, I have your email as XYZ. Is that right? No, it's not. Here's my email address. People have a natural inclination to correct you. So if there's ways that you can, weave false information into this flow of conversation, great. But I will say, I don't believe in scripting. And the reason why is because of experience. The best laid plans can fall apart in an instant. Either you don't get the right person on the phone, or they challenge you and everything goes to heck because you anticipated something that doesn't happen. And then you're frazzled and it breaks down your confidence. And then you're going to start hearing the objections from the target. So try not to script it. Try to keep everything very fluid and dynamic. Be prepared to segue into another line of conversation. Maybe they stray away, but hey, maybe they're going to give you the keys to the kingdom too, and give you things that you didn't necessarily even plan for. So be prepared to let them guide the conversation, but also be prepared to pivot and pull it back to your goals as well. So for this one example that I'm going to share, I collected data on a company, and I found that they were very involved in charitable giving to the extent that they had a manager of charitable giving who did all of their organizational and operational, administrative, etc. stuff for their giving campaigns. I also found out that they were very involved with one specific charity. So I decided I was going to be a representative of that charity, and I was going to ask the target whether or not they'd received a PDF form that I'd sent the week before, and expected her to say no, because of course I had not sent a form. And then I would, use that to find out all the information that I needed in my list of flags here. So I said I wanted to recognize the charity for their work. I knew how much they'd given in the previous campaign. So I said, you gave X amount of dollars last year, and we wanted to do a little bit of recognition for all the companies that have been so wonderful for us this past year. And all of this information was in a press release. And then I asked her if she'd received the form, and she said no. And then I asked her to confirm her email address, and was able to then ask her to commit to opening this form when I sent it again. And I also was able to ask her what type of software she was using to make sure she could receive and open it, and identify some other key areas of information that would help me to build a pretext for escalating to like the next level of access within the company to another individual. So this is a very ground floor, bottom level of the phishing campaign, to build basic information that can be added to another pretext and then level up through the organization higher and higher for levels of access and gaining of information that is more sensitive. All right, and then I found out that this employee had kids. She was a writer and very creative. She's motivated by the causes that she's involved with, so I knew that she would be empathetic to me, and I knew that she would be more forgiving if I had a problem during the conversation if I blamed it on something to do with parenting. And she owned her own consulting business and did some other things and was more involved in the community outside of work for causes like autism and some other philanthropy type roles within her community. And so anyway, I called this person, and she was very helpful. But at one point, I did ask for the same bit of information twice, and it kind of put a crack in that veil of the character. And she said, "What?" And I could hear the gears turning. And so immediately I said something to the effect of, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm just flustered today because I'm working from home with a sick kid." Now, this was before like working from home was normal. So immediately she was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope they feel better soon." And she just completely dropped any suspicion about who I was or what I had asked her for, and we just proceeded with the conversation as if nothing had happened. So definitely make sure that you are prepared to offer excuses to the challenges that your targets give you that will resonate with them. And knowing who they are and what matters to them is going to be critical to being able to overcome those objections and then move forward in the conversation. So from this, I was able to get quite a bit of information, have her engage with that PDF form that could have been a malicious application or software that would hurt her system. And I left her feeling better for having met me, which is a term that or a phrase that Chris Hadnagy uses a lot, and that I really taken in as something that's very important to me when I do phishing as well. Because especially with phishing, man, I feel guilty as heck when I finish a call and I've won, or everything is over. I really feel terrible, genuinely terrible, for having led these people to do something that may have not been in their best interest. So I try to make sure that my pretexts are of a tone that once they found out, or they find out that they've been had, that they don't necessarily feel victimized or just extremely depressed or like they were tricked and lied to, but that they understand that this was a safe scenario where they learned a lesson and now they can carry that lesson forward and avoid something that could potentially have caused a lot of damage. So that's something to keep in mind when you're coming up with your pretext is, it's really easy to get people to do what you want them to do when you can scare the heck out of them or manipulate them or negatively, force them to do something, whether it's, blackmail basically or something else. So I would encourage you never to use things that don't make you feel good because they're definitely not going to make your targets feel good. Targeting people's kids, I've seen things that targeted C-level employees of Fortune 500 companies, children, and they gathered OSINT on the child and the child's social media accounts, and then used those to phish the C-level executive. And that is something that really steps out of the ethical hacker bubble, like you're outside of the circle of trust. And I would say, steer clear of those types of things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because you do find really salacious, juicy, gossipy information about a company doesn't mean that you should use that to, inform a pretext. So you, at your discretion, of course, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but that would be my advice, because you're going to feel horrible about it. And it's just not the kind of feeling I want to leave with my clients. So something to consider. All right, and then wrapping it up, I just wanted to say many thank yous to Layer 8 for inviting me to speak to you today. You can absolutely connect with me on Twitter. I'm a little too responsive, and on LinkedIn as well. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out anytime. Also on Discord, pseudofox, where the O's are zeros. And I look forward to chatting with all of you about this. I especially am eager for your feedback or any questions. So I will go ahead and stop talking and see if we have any questions.
Okay, so we had one so far on the channel from Jazz AHN. Is there a way to practice these techniques outside of engagements?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there absolutely is. The one that comes to mind is most definitely the SECTF, and I know that there are other similar social engineering type contests that happen, but you can do these things without actively engaging the targets and practice your OSINT, 24 hours a day. I use friends and family for testing out my leadership skills. So if I want to like lead a family member to do something, you can do that in a totally non-malicious way and practice those trust building and rapport and leadership skills with your friends and family and outside of engagements without impacting anyone in a negative way as well.
Excellent. And we have another one from Pretext. What's a pretext you used that afterwards you wished you hadn't?
Man, that is a tough one. So I think the pretext that I used when I won the SECTF was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I definitely incentivized the targets, and in the previous most pretexts that I use, I don't blatantly incentivize people. I just count on them liking me enough to help me. But in this one, I went straight for the jugular. And I just said, hey, we're upgrading all the laptops for all of our remote salespeople. And, you know, we need to know, you know, what kind of software you use so that we can get your new machine all set up. So what kind of computer do you have? Is this the VPN you're using? And I just went through all these, basically like a survey style pretext. And I got these people so excited about their new computer. And it's been nearly a year, and I still think about each one of those individual people and how bummed they must have been when they found out that that wasn't actually happening. And it still makes me feel bad. It really honestly does.
Well, all right, we have another one from SCHLANGE. One, trying to get someone to open a malicious attachment. How do you know a target has opened it? Do you use a phishing app?
I am not going to discuss the software that I use. If you want to talk about that with me privately, don't hesitate to reach out. Tracking is definitely important. I know that there are some social engineers that they don't believe in tracking. They just want the goods. You know what I mean? So if somebody uses it, they'll know because it connects in a way that they can see and understand. But I like to track and monitor and report and analyze everything. So I make sure that I can figure out, you know, opens, clicks, all that stuff. Because that's very important to me personally, because I'm a total statistical dork. And so, yeah, I would say it's very important. If you want to learn more about how to do it, don't hesitate to reach out to me privately.
All right, and I think we have time for one more quick question from Adam. Adam is asking if there is information that companies can have for routine contacts, for example, customer service contacts, that would be problematic for your pretexts.
I don't know that I understand exactly where we're going with this. So I try to gather all the information that I can and make sure that I know that if they do things a certain way that I can speak to those processes. And if there is a channel where they route all their customer service, the best way to get around those generic phone numbers and perhaps call centers and you know, offshore teams is to try to find their direct dial phone numbers into the headquarter building or the branch office or wherever you're targeting. You want to bypass, you know, the call center in the middle of the country that serves the whole nation and go directly to the person who's sitting at their desk at the location where you're targeting. The best way to do that is to try to find information about direct dial phone numbers. There are many ways that you can do this. Lots of salespeople are great about posting all of their direct contact information because they don't want to miss out on their commissions. So you can find some direct dial phone numbers and then from there kind of experiment and see if you can figure out the rest. Or there are sales tools and lead generating tools for salespeople online that will give you that information. So there's a few of those. One that comes to mind is Zoom Info, which is actually a paid service, but it does have some free tiers that you can use, or you can just go ahead and social engineer yourself an enterprise account free trial.